I am here today with a super fun and bright Easter 2-page layout for the Cut to You design team. So for this project, I was given the challenge of using some title themed cut files, and I've actually decided to use 2 of the title cut files, and I'll link those down in my description box below, to create a 2-page spread from Easter. I think this was Easter 2020. I'm using this collection from Photoplay, which is quite a little bit older. I don't have a huge supply of Easter themed products, but this collection stood out to me because it was really bright and colourful, and the clothing that my kids have on in these photos is quite bright. Because I don't have a massive amount of papers, I think I've only got the 1 paper pack, and there's I don't know, I'm not quite sure how many, but there's not a huge amount of papers in there. I didn't want to use up a big chunk of the paper that I did have backing these cut files. So I decided to try something a little bit different, and I dove into my stash of acrylic paints. And at the start of the video, you would have seen me showing you the kind of the waffle weave rainbow coloured paper, and I used that as my inspiration, and I pulled some acrylic paints from my stash that matched the colors from that little waffle weave paper, and I'm just creating kind of an ombre graduated. Well, that's my hope anyway. I wanted these colors to really flow into each other. What I'm painting on here is I used my Cameo and my Silhouette software to to cut the backing for my cut file from just some plain white cardstock. It was really simple. All I did was I released the compound path of the cut file, and then I just removed all of the center pieces, so I was left with just the outline, and then that gave me something to paint. So for the first one there, for the first cut file, I've just gone top to bottom, horizontally, vertically, and painted down that color rainbow. For this one here, this is the second cut file backing, which you can't really see on camera, but I promise you it is cut from that white cardstock. I wanted to do a diagonal and having the colors going from the opposite direction. So on the previous one, I started with the yellow at the top and then moved down to the purple. And on this one, I'm starting with the yellow down on the bottom and moving on a diagonal from the bottom right up to the top left, finishing up with purple up in the top left. This was a really fun technique. I don't think I've actually painted a cut file backing like this. I know I've used watercolor before. I don't often reach for my acrylic paints. I'm not too sure why, because I've got a really healthy stash of them, and they are super, super fun. And I admit, when the paint was going down here, I was a bit unsure. But as you can see, once I've pulled that off and adhered it to the back of the cut files, it just looks so good. I'm so happy with how that turned out. So bright, so fun, and there's the other one just there. So I've got all of my pieces ready to go, and I am working with a white cardstock background, but I wanted to add something to the background that would really help those white cut files stand out against the background. So I've grabbed 3 different colors. These are Lindy's Stamp Gang Magicals, and if you want to know what the colors are, let me know in the comments and I'm more than happy to give you that info. But I've chosen 3 colors. I had a yellow and a purple and a green, and the colors are really, really great, except for the fact that the yellow has come out a little bit more gold. I was hoping for that brighter, almost more fluoro yellow, but the color that I chose, when it dried, it was definitely more of a gold tone, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. The effect is still there. So for that first one, I have just added all of my splatters up to the top of the page. And for the second page, which was, I'm not quite sure, I'm trying to think, it's been some time since I recorded this. And for the second page, the cut file will sit over to one side. So I'm just focusing my splatters just over on the one side of this page. And I think in a moment, you'll see me bring the cut file back in. And I'm just going to hold it over the top, and that's just to make sure that I've added enough splatters so that they will sit behind the cut file. There we go. Okay, so those are all dry. I'm just going to give you a close-up look there of how that looks. It's not a super bold mixed media background effect, and for this project, it really served its purpose, and I'm really happy with it. So for this side of the layout, I wanted to create a layer of banners. I have two pieces just off to the left there that I had already cut banner notches from. And then I just left this bit in here so that you can see how I go about cutting a fishtail banner from a larger piece of paper. I just roughly folded it in half and then lined it up on my cutting mat to mark out where 1/2 inch is, or 1/4 inch I think it was, and then use that as the guide to trim the corners off. So I'm just checking how I want my placement to sit there, and now I'm going to stick some of those down. So as I said, I wanted to layer up these banners, but just to give it some added texture, I am going to come in with my edge distressing tool, and I'm just going to rough up the edges of each of those banners. And I'm sorry, I probably should have cut this bit out or sped it up, but no, it's right here. If you have watched any of my previous videos, you will know that distressed edges and all the textural elements is something that I really, really love to include on all of my layouts. And I'm so happy that I managed to get hold of a new edge distressing tool. It's a little bit of a learning curve. My old one, the blade, I'd had it for so long that the blade had a tendency to rip rather than distress. So this one here, it's just getting used to what it feels like to have a sharp blade again. So I've just layered those up on top of that banner, and then I'm going to bring my sewing machine in, and I don't make you watch me do this, but off camera I am going to add some thread. And I've just shown you there, I've left the ends loose on the top of that banner, again just for a little bit of added visual interest and some extra texture on the layout, because I do love me some sewing thread. So that little piece is all ready to go, all ready to be stuck down. I'm using my double-sided tape here because I don't think it was on camera, but I ran out of ATG tape in my gun, and I really didn't want to stop my process to go through the whole rigmarole of reloading that, so I just decided to go back to the tape. And I'm using my T-square ruler here to line it up. I have learnt some lessons recently. I have a tendency to go in a little bit gung-ho and stick things down without really giving my full attention to where elements are going to be placed, and then I end up having to pull things back up again. But this time I was being really careful to take note of where I needed that cut file to sit and then line up my photo accordingly. I have, as you can see, backed the entire cut file with some foam tape, and then off camera I've removed all the tiny little backing pieces. And I'm just adding a little bit of extra wet adhesive, not a lot, just a few little dots on the back of that. It's something that I'm tending to do a lot more now, is adding wet adhesive to some of my elements, because I just want to make sure that everything in my albums does really stand up to the test of time. And although I'm fairly confident in the staying power of that adhesive foam tape, I am just adding a little bit of extra wet adhesive because I think it will help it to stay in place. Now, I am pulling out a technique that used to be a real favorite for me, but I haven't actually done for such a long time. Again, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that my go-to for almost all of my pages at the moment has been to mat my page onto my white cardstock onto a coloured pattern paper or a pattern paper border. But I'm not doing it with this layout because I knew that I wanted to go back into my archive of fun techniques and pull this one back out again. So I've used my scissors to cut a piece out of one edge, and then I have just torn a strip, or just made a tear in two more sides, and then I've backed each of those with some coordinating pattern paper from the collection, and now I'm going to expose that patterned paper. I don't know if there's a specific name for this technique, but hopefully I'm describing it well enough that you can understand what it is that I'm doing here on camera. So I think this technique is having a little bit of a renaissance amongst scrapbookers. I think it's come back in style again, or maybe it never went out of style. But certainly when I flick through some of my older albums, I find that this is something that I was doing a lot. But at some point it just didn't didn't continue to be a part of my scrapbooking arsenal. So I really wanted to bring it back because I think it's a super fun way of adding just that little bit of extra visual interest, just those little details. And by doing it in 3 different places, one at the top, one on the side and one on the bottom, it creates that visual triangle which really draws the viewer's eyes back into the center of the layout, which is definitely what you want when you are creating these kinds of layouts. So I finished the torn pieces off by turning the edges back out from where the tear was, and then I've just used my tiny stapler with some really pretty teal blue staples, and I've just stapled the join down in place. It's again, it's a little bit of extra detail, but it also serves the purpose of preventing them from ripping any further if little hands at some point in the future happen to get hold of this layout and try to play with it. So now we're at the fun part of this page, and remembering this is a 2-page layout, so this is only half of my completed project, and I'm coming in with some embellishments. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, I don't have a lot of products in this particular range. I had the paper pad and I had a sticker sheet which came with the paper pad. So I have fussy cut some pieces out from some of the papers. Those Easter eggs were fussy cut out, but then to supplement it, I also have created some little embellishments of my own using some metal dies. I have a couple of different bow dies that I've used. One is just a flat bow, which is what you can see at the top of the word bunny, and the other one I have is a stitched edge 3D bow die, and you'll see that come in again on this page. I really love that little bow die. It's so sweet, and I definitely, every time I use it, I tell myself that I need to make use of it more often, and because it is such a sweet little finishing element. But we've pushed that one aside now, and we are on to the second page, which is actually going to be the page that sits to the left on the spread. So similarly, I have pulled in 3 blocks of patterned paper. On that other page, you would have seen me use 3 blocks of patterned paper with fishtail banners. This time I have just kept them as rectangular blocks. I have distressed the edges, and what I was showing you there, which I realize you probably can't see, is that I have just run them through my sewing machine just to add some stitch detailing around the edge of each of those pieces of patterned paper. And then I'm going to layer them up on top of each other, and they are going to serve as a base for my photo. So once again, I did want to make sure that I had everything in the right place before I go sticking things down. So I'm trying to be doubly certain of things these days, because honestly, I'm tired of pulling things back up off pages. It just feels like such a waste of my scrappy time. So slow down, Belinda, slow down and get it right the first time, and you won't have to waste time and adhesive and potentially paper and frustration on pulling it back up again. So I've just layered them up, not really putting too much thought into it. I wanted to have that green piece be on the left because it is the bolder piece, and it's obviously, I cut that a little bit longer. So I've got that in place. Now I had put all of this foam adhesive onto the back of the cut file, but then I realized that I wanted to just slightly overlap the cut file over onto the photo. So I've pulled up some of the foam adhesive from a few of those letters there. And now adding some adhesive to the back of my photo and getting that ready to adhere down to the page. But once again, I'm just making sure that I've got my placement correct before I go sticking anything down. So I've brought that cut file in and I'm using it as my guide to get my photo block into the right place. And I'm just using my T-square ruler there to make sure that it is nice and straight. Once again, I saved you the agony of watching me pull all of those little backing pieces off that foam tape there, and I'm just adding a little bit of extra wet glue and obviously some wet glue on those letters that don't have any adhesive on them. And I'm going to flip that over, try to use my T-square ruler again to make sure that that is once again nice and straight, and then that is stuck down. So this page is going to hold my journaling. I have typed up some I have typed it out on my typewriter and cut it up into strips, and then you're going to just hopefully very quickly watch me adhere them down. I don't know if I include this in a lot of my videos, but I thought I would just keep it in for this one, just to show you how I do it. So I hold the end of each of the strips with my tweezers and just add a really thin line of adhesive, and that is my Art Glitter Glue, or my Art Institute glitter glue that I use, and I've got the fine tip applicator on it there, and it's just a really handy way. I used to run these strips through my Xyron, but I didn't like the adhesive that always ended up on the sides of each of them. So, and I just find that the wet glue is a quick and easy way to do it now. So I'm repeating that fun little element back over on this page. So I've once again cut a piece out of one of the edges, and then I have torn two of the edges, and I'm sticking the pattern paper down behind each of those so that the white cardstock, once it's distressed and torn up, will show the patterned paper behind it. Once again, I have done it in 3 different places, one at the top, one on the side, and then one on the bottom. Again, creating the visual triangle for this page, but then once the 2 pages are put together, because I've made sure that I've varied the placement and I have been careful about which pattern papers I've used in which spot. Once again, once the 2 pages are put together, those little added elements around the edge of the page will really help to draw the viewer's eyes into everything that is happening on this 2-page spread. Really simple to put this page together, as you've just seen. So now we are up to embellishing, and it really doesn't take me very long to do this embellishing because I had everything all ready to go, and it is quite a simple layout. I'm not creating embellishment clusters for this one because I wanted to have more of a scattered effect of just having the little bits and pieces popping out around the title. As I mentioned at the start of the video, my challenge for this layout was to use title cut files. So I really did want to make these big bold titles the standout feature on these layouts. So there's a couple of those little bows again. You can see I've added the yellow one to the word some and the tealy green one just to fill in that little bit of empty space there between my photo block and my journaling. I've got some more of those fussy cut Easter eggs, and a couple more of those just flat dies. The Easter eggs I've just tucked in there to the left of the photo, and then I'm layering up just a simple little yellow flower, which was also fussy cut from one of the papers, and coming in with a couple of heart stickers just to finish off the embellishing portion. Now I cannot finish a page without adding a border, and I wanted to do something different than my usual stitched border here. So once again, I dove back into my old school arsenal of techniques, and I have grabbed a pen, just a fine liner pen in a tealy green color, and I'm just adding a really simple doodly border around the edges of my layouts. Off camera, I'm pretty sure I do come in and add some Nuvo drops, but I don't make you watch that because it's a little bit boring. But that is it. We've got some close-up photos coming at the end. The links to everything that you need for the Cut to Use store is down in my description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.